10 years. And we both have a passion for especially missionary biographies. Or I just like stories about women in history who have done some amazing things. And so we're just taking different women and we're talking about their stories on our podcast. And it's, I'm going to look at Brian. My Brian.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, tell me about your podcast.
So, well, we've done Gladys Elward. We've done quite a few where we just talk. Again, both Jasmine and I having this passion.
Yeah.
We've still got so many too. I mean, we've got Elizabeth
that's great
Fry
because you need lots of people if you're going to have
Florence
a podcast.
Nightingale.
Yeah.
There's so many. You find though when you look back in history, the most notable women who have done the greatest things in history have been Christians. They've done it for the glory of the Lord and by the power of the Lord. And it's interesting to get all these quotes. I mean, one day soon it'll be Harriet Tubman, just all these amazing Harriet Beecher Stowe, some of these different people who have, just done incredible things. She likes, and so I'm sure we're going to have some interesting characters too because she's...
Is Harriet Nelson on there?
Harriet Nelson. You know what?
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
Brian, that was for you from your phone. It's speaking to you. See, it didn't agree with you saying things like that either. It was like, you know what? This is why you're not on the podcast with me, Brian.
You know, it's such a good idea to have this podcast because so often we hear about these great men we should know, be it Charles Spurgeon or whoever, and the women don't get as much of a...
That's right. And this is more to tantalize people because what we're hoping is that they'll want to pick up these books and find these books themselves and read. A lot of these people you can Google. We just recorded about Corrie ten Boom, and that won't be heard on the podcast for a few weeks. But the interesting thing is I was just wondering, I wonder if, what's online about her. I had reread The Hiding Place and Tramp for the Lord. And I went on, and there's just a wealth. You can even listen to her teaching online. And there was one that I found just really interesting about a woman who was giving a tour of the hiding place that it's called Bayeux, her house that she grew up in. And she was telling the story of Corrie, and it was fascinating. So much was really, really interesting.
Yeah. I wonder if there might not be some books that, or maybe a book that comes out of this, because the thing about all these biographies is they're all great, but there are not that many people who are currently writing on these people, so everything you're reading is from, decades ago for the most part, if not even longer.
But you know what we put out there is we said to our podcast listeners, we said, if you've got a story of somebody who has really been instrumental in your life, leading you to Jesus, or someone who's like kind of the, the undisclosed heroine that somebody who's just amazing.
The unsung hero.
The unsung hero.
Yes.
And, I know of so many women who have played an influential, wonderful role. Maybe a teacher, maybe I had my Aunt Essie, who was also a camp director, maybe a Sunday school teacher, or your mom, maybe a grandmother, somebody who just spoke into your life. Tell us their story.
Yeah.
And so what we'd like to is, as soon as those stories start coming to us, we'd like to read one. Like one a week before we get into the missionary or the person that we're highlighting's biography.
Yeah, those are great because I read this quote today by Patrick Schreiner. He is a professor at your seminary at Western, and it was this quote, and he even said after he quoted it, he said he was stunned when he read it. I can't remember who it was by, but the gist of it, because I can't repeat it, but the gist of it was about all of the people in history who have impacted history and impacted it in such a way that it has come down and affected us today, but nobody ever really knew about them.
Yeah.
They were just a small circle, and they, and then they died, and they're in a cemetery somewhere, and nobody even knows much about them.
Well, think about D.L. Moody was led to the Lord by a shoe salesman.
Yes.
And nobody knows
Perfect
who
example.
that shoe salesman was.
Right.
his name has not been, brought down. But I thought, how neat to, I was on a panel, and we were answering questions, and one of the questions was like, who's been the most influential person in your life? And everyone was giving a dead person's name. And I thought, wow, and I felt like the Lord spoke to me and said, there are a lot of people living. Honor them while they live. It's great that you honor them after they die, but they don't know, but honor them while they live. And so I thought, my dad was alive at the time, so I could, honor my dad like, hey, Dad. Mm-hmm. In fact, the last 2 years of his life, Brian and I used to go over to my father's house. Some people don't know, but my father was Chuck Smith, Pastor Chuck. And we would go over to his house every Friday night, and I would take dinner. And when we would sit at dinner, my dad had lost a lot of memories from his strokes and from the chemo and the radiation. And so I found myself reminding Dad of all the things that the Lord had done in his life and telling my mom and dad their stories, my mom with her dementia. And I remember after my dad's stroke, at one point I'd said, Dad, how did you meet Mom? I love that story. Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't remember. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, well, then I'll tell you. Mm-hmm. So I was repeating to my dad all those stories that he told me about his life or things that the Lord would do. So when people come up to me and say, your father, the Lord used him in my life and this is how, I'd say, well, tell me more. And they would tell me. And then that Friday night I would say, Dad, I want to tell you. Or Mom, I want to tell you. I talked to this woman and this is how God used you. And my mom would be like, he used me? She'd be so excited. Mm-hmm. And my dad would just smile. And it was such a blessing. But I thought, wow, what a great thing to do now. Mm-hmm. If we tell somebody's story and that daughter, that's, woman says, why don't you listen to this podcast? And they hear their story. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I just pray that God uses it for his glory. And I think that I hear Lou. Can Lou hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yay!
Because before we could hear you muttering under your breath. I'm just going to be really honest.
No.
Yep. We know all the things you say when you mutter.
Wow.
And one of the things was, I can't believe this.
No.
Caught on tape.
We have a lot of stuff going out in the front of our house right now. So it seems like all the drains are clogged in everybody else's houses but ours. So, but everybody have a jackhammer. Why do you need a jackhammer for I don't get it.
Oh, man.
You need one to go with a radio program. They're just for the background. The jackhammers are really...
You know what? I know what you're saying because last night we decided to maybe why don't we eat outside because it's so beautiful and our kids were over. And that's when our neighbor decided to mow his lawn. And it was an art, I have a view outside my back window that I can see 8 of my neighbor's yards. That's how close our houses are.
Right.
And so that lawnmower, it was just like, we're like, well, let's go indoors, That way we don't have to wear a mask.
Well, the problem is that they win. See, you got to,
Right.
So, how you doing, Lou? How's life in the big SD?
Well, the big SD is still pretty quiet. I mean, we, the streets are pretty much rolled up here. Actually, you can't imagine. I mean, you probably do, but you go out to the beach and you can see it's absolute vacant.
Yeah.
And, it is spectacular. So, in that perspective, yet, we're still at about the same rate of progression of COVID here as you are in Orange County.
Yeah.
And, it's as everyone's wanting to imagine this flattening of the curve happening. And we're all really almost, you can just see the entire human population pushing this huge boulder over to get it to go down the slope. We're still at a very tenuous place right now. And, there's a number of us that, especially in this, collective community of these task forces that are sort of building up around all the large pharmaceutical organizations, there's individuals that are wanting to see that happening, and yet there's really a collective caution right now. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Okay, and those of us who are shut in are getting really frustrated.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. My son in Northern California was saying that they now have to they're supposed to wear face masks in their yards.
Oh, what?
Yes, they're supposed to wear them in their yard. And they've been, you're supposed to, if you see someone in their yard, front yard, and they don't have a face mask on, you're supposed to report them. He's in Northern California.
my goodness.
And he said, just I like precautions. I'm like a super precautious person.
Yeah.
But these precautions, I think some are just going too far.
Yeah.
And I think it's making us rebellious against all of them by, personally, that's how I'm feeling.
Yeah. They're in the People's Republic of Sonoma County.
Now, how far is that from Mendocino County? Because I saw a story the other day about a worship team, a church that they told the worship team, okay, no singing, no playing wind instruments because you're blowing air. Yeah. And again.
Well, somebody was telling me about there's drones that now are measuring the social distance.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and not only that, but they also have these bracelets now that they're going to start using in larger organizations that are going to have a buzzer go off when you get closer than 6 feet from another individual.
Oh, is that for real?
Yeah, that's happening.
Unbelievable.
I wonder if iPhones will react to that.
Yeah, but
And it's all this heat sensory, that's being used for individuals that, may or may not have a variation in their temperature. And the minute there's an escalation of a temperature is when there's going to be an alarm also. So we have,
So Lou, where do we, where do we draw the line between rational, reasonable, scientifically based, precautions versus just hysteria and kind of just nuttiness? Some of it is, there is a reality in human history of bureaucratic control of entire populations. And of course, China has that going quite well now since 1949. Because some of this stuff it's just sounding a little bit nutty. And,
the challenge with that, thinking exactly that, is if we knew more, it's always going to be back to the scientific facts of what we know about this virus. Mm-hmm. As much as we've been studying its origin, we're getting more information on it. I can't tell you the conspiracy theories. Oh my gosh, I was so convinced from Francis Collins' full lecture on absolutely the sequence is pangolin, and that's the animal that it was transferred to human from. And so it's all about that. And there's absolutely no mention of that anywhere in the scientific literature. It's right? All about that. And then someone's saying, well, then how could it be from a bat that is, we're talking hundreds of miles away in a cave when there's no evidence of bats anywhere in the Wuhan region? Mm-hmm. So then we think, okay, well, what actually is the Wuhan University anyway? I mean, before we really get into the conspiracy theories, you have to look at why would they have the Wuhan University and what's so specific about it? Well, it happens to be the only university in China that has what's called a biosafety laboratory number 4. Mm-hmm. There are 4 different sequences. And if you're familiar with the sequence, I used to work in a P3 or B cell 3 when I was doing HIV work decades ago. And I was having to go, and you can go into a P3 facility unless you were recognized by individuals that are around you, and they watched you go through the process of washing, gowning, and going into the laboratory and sitting down and watching you for 5 minutes. That was the protocol. You could not enter otherwise. Mm-hmm. For a P4 facility, you need a literal moon suit to go in. And you need to have that artificial oxygen. I mean, it's a complete, because it's all the unknown pathogens. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what this is. It's an unknown origin. And because we don't really know what's going to happen with it next, all this biology that's going on right now is trying to understand its behavior. Yeah. And it's all really rooted in its transmissibility. Mm-hmm. Because, we do know that it's a receptor. We do understand the biology of what happens when it actually enters into an epithelial cell of your lung. Mm-hmm. The real issue is it's what is it going to do to get inside of you? There's the new number that's out there in the scientific community is called the R0 factor. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't heard of that one, that's a classic epidemiological term. That's simply a way of saying how many people will be exposed to this virus and receive it from one person. Mm-hmm. So the standard R0 factor for an influenza that happens every single year is usually about 1.5. This R factor is 2 to 3, potentially 4, meaning that one individual has the potential to either double or triple what would happen with an influenza virus. Now, why is that important? When you look at the numbers of infected people that are asymptomatic and or mild of COVID-19, it's astounding. It's logarithmically. We're talking 3 zeros or more compared to the SARS, MERS, coronavirus. So because we have this massive number of people that have been exposed, it's really difficult to have a moral sense of saying, okay, we can proceed because of economic issues, when we really don't know if it's a tidal wave or it's a flat wave. We just don't know what's happening right now. So I think that's the fear factor.
Yeah. So what about the okay? So I think New York yesterday, I think, was 214,000 cases in New York. The next closest state, I can't remember what state it was.
New Jersey.
Was 70,000, and then the next closest to New Jersey. And then everybody's kind of in, there's a lot in the 27 and 29,000. California yesterday was 27,000 plus cases with 890 deaths.
Right.
So now you look at New York and you've got, it seems like kind of an extraordinary situation in New York. Now, you've been to New York. I've been to New York. Your kids live in New York. My kids live in New York. We know what New York is like. Right. So it makes some sense that that's what happened in New York. You have a subway system. You have millions of people in a small area that are, bumping into each other, slobbering all over each other. They're doing everything.
Public transport.
Yeah,
too.
Public transportation, all of that stuff. But then when you look at California, 37 million people in our population and 890 have died. That seems like to be in like some crazy lockdown just seems like, well, wait a second. That doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
And I get what you're saying about, but we don't know what it's going to do. But then it seems like we do kind of know what it's going to do because we've seen what it does in certain places under certain circumstances.
Right. And this is where we get into the trouble of acute versus chronic. Because yes, the acute factor we're getting our handles on right now. We're seeing what this 14-day period and so on is giving us an indication of going from exposure to infection to potential hospitalization and to death. And that progression and that rate of progression is what we're seeing. What we don't know is, and this is what's happened in San Diego, I'm sure it's happened in Orange County. If you've been watching each one of these, every day there's like 4 or 5 more people added to the list. And every single time, and I've looked at it and I've taken pictures of each time, it says it. All of these cases have underlying medical conditions. And what is that really telling us? That this virus is potentiating. That word means it's putting power behind a pre-existing condition, whether there be any kind of insult to the lungs, whether there are any kind of cardiovascular issues or something like that. It accelerates it. And that's why it's in the older people primarily, because they're already compromised with sort of failing immune quality and so on.
Right.
So this is why we don't know what the long-term effects are going to be, i.e. what's going to happen like in 6 months from now. Is this virus going to reactivate like often can happen with viruses such as types of influenza? And or we got rid of SARS-1, the very first one, the 2002. It is gone completely from our culture. But MERS is still around. It is the most lethal of them all. MERS had a death rate higher than like 5 times the death rate of COVID.
Wow.
But it was in such a restricted area. And what the key words here is, yes, it's about washing the hands. Yes, it's about the distancing and so on. But we're dealing with one of the biggest changes in our world, and that's called globalization. Like you said, you and I go to New York. We also go to Israel. We also go. We drive to these places like we're going to the supermarket. And, we're taking. We don't realize that we're exposing ourselves everywhere we go. Everybody's doing this. So we're getting this massive exchange of different types of, whether it be virions, particles, and so on that we carry. And, that's what's going to change the dynamics of this. And that's what we're experiencing right now.
Yeah.
Consequences of globalization.
So just out of curiosity, with MERS is Middle Eastern
Respiratory syndrome.
respiratory syndrome. So how come, was it kind of isolated to the Middle East? I mean, it obviously originated in the Middle East, right? But I don't remember. I remember SARS clearly, but I don't remember MERS so much as being an issue in the United States.
But it had a much lower R0 factor.
Okay.
And its contagion was not even a fraction. It was a fraction of what COVID is.
Okay.
So, and then what we're trying to understand is, why is this virus so contagious? What is it about this virus that's causing this?
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but I know maybe one or two people that have had it. I was walking around the Rock yesterday, and there's this elderly gentleman in late 80s walking around with his dog, and he was just smiling at me about 15, 20 feet away from me. And he goes, "Oh yeah, my wife and I had it. We were down for a couple of weeks, but we're back." And I went, "Excuse me?" Like, okay, here we go. This is my death sentence. Yeah. And but here's this moment of discussion, and he had there's so many that have had the mild forms.
Yeah.
So we're realizing that it's, like I say, it's highly contagious, and understanding that contagion is what all of the biology is about right now.
Now, if you've had it, do your T cells then have the right antibody for it?
Okay. And the great question, Cheryl.
Thank you.
It's sort of like an immunological moment, okay? It's the memory cells, okay, that are going to be, are the B cells that are producing the antibodies, right? So those memory cells will retain this sequence of this particular virus. That's what's so great about having a vaccine, because now it's going to always remember exposure to this specific one. And I'd love to say that we all know about the genetics of this virus, but unfortunately, like I've said before, we're not worried about mutation and so on, but that has not been experimentally demonstrated, meaning that there is mutability potential. And if that's the case, then we have to be thinking about second generation vaccines. We haven't even gotten to the first one yet. So we have to be thinking along the lines of, what are the most potential mutable regions of this genome? And with us, we have to understand how it functions. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of this experimental biology that's going on right now, to understand how does it not only infect, but what is its rate of reproducing itself within the cell? What is its potential of leaving a remnant of itself, and how much does it leave, so that it could actually cause other infections in this cell that may or may not be alive after it bursts out of the cell?
Okay, so you're talking like, let's say something like chicken pox, and the way it can come back later as
Shingles.
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about this. We're not sure that it's completely eradicated from the system.
Right.
Because I think about how the smallpox, I mean, that was such a dangerous thing. And then we came up with the vaccine, which I heard that we no longer have, because they thought they eradicated it, and it's come back in some zones.
Some zones, yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, Lou, here's one thing, though. When you talk about the contagious nature of it, so how does that, how do we know that it's so contagious when so few people have it in comparison? Like I said, in a state of 37 million people, we have 27,000 people that have it. So how is that like a super contagious thing?
And the rate in which people are infected is what's the contagion. In other words, we've all been exposed to it, and it's going to behave differently in every one of us depending on our bodies and the condition of our bodies.
But wait, isn't that true with just the influenza virus too?
Yeah.
Yes, it's so. I was just reading the statistics. Like 55,000 died last year from influenza.
Right, and it's the exact same thing with this underlying medical conditions, because most, if not all, of those numbers are all based on an individual who has already had a compromised body, and it's usually the last stage of their life is when there's this finale with the influenza and or pneumonia of some sort, because it's where your immune system is literally incapacitated.
Okay.
That's when it becomes more vulnerable.
Okay, but that brings up the question then, why, apart from theory, is this any different than the flu? If the flu kills 55,000 people in the U.S. every year who have compromised physical situations, and that's what we're seeing COVID doing, what's the difference? Why are we all locked down and we're not locked down during the flu?
And it all goes back to the uncertainty factor. The uncertainty factor of not knowing who is going to go. You see, in the influenza, we have a vaccine.
Yeah.
And that vaccine is very effective. And it's reduced the numbers dramatically compared to what it could be, like it could be 1918 and so on, which had an extremely high R0 factor.
Very high.
But now we've reduced that down significantly because of the vaccine. And because of the reduction, that's a different story completely. Its level of contagion is completely different. This one is so contagious that we really don't understand who's who as far as the level of infection and what's going to actually happen to that epithelial tissue in your lungs. And I heard a really interesting comment, and I just, I was amazed to hear some of these ideas that, smoking benefits you now. And you think about, well, you're going to smoke now? That's some of the crazy science that's happening right now, because we're trying to, well, there has to be some measures that we're doing that may or may not be. And so we're looking at all the deviant behavior to see if that's actually beneficial at this point.
Oh, man.
The pot shops are open and the vape shops are open. Yeah, these are all things. Yeah, gosh, this is crazy. I mean, I don't know. I'm a little bit, I feel like I've been, I've worked hard to navigate it in my own mind and to just be as patient with everything. But then with all the conflicting information that's coming out, and it just seems to get more confusing by the day, you just really wonder at a certain point. And again, we know that, scientists or politicians or whatever, they're completely fallible, and they have their presuppositions about a lot of things. And so then you just wonder, like, what in the world? So, my Mike and Chris are living in Jacksonville, Florida right now. And Chris just sent me a thing today that the mayor of Jacksonville at 5:00 today, they opened the beaches back up and said, okay, here's the restrictive hours, but, you can go to the beach again. So who knows?
My goodness. Wow.
We'll be right back in just a little bit here on Pastor's Perspective. Stand by.
Pastor's Perspective continues in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pastor's Perspective continues with your question to 1-888-564-6173. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
And we'll get to your phone calls in just a little bit here on Pastor's Perspective, but we're talking to Lou Wing right now, Dr. Lou Wing, getting a coronavirus update. Pastor Brian and Cheryl Brodersen in the studio with me as well. Thank you so much for listening and for watching on YouTube and Facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective.
All right, Lou, it is so, it's just been so great having you here on Friday. Thank you for coming on again today. So give us just kind of a final word, just both a medical, biology expert word and just a good word from the Lord. Combine those two together.
Well, I think one of the most important factors here is, after hearing the president share about the phases of reentry back into our society, whether it's going to be in these three different phases that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And just the fact of hearing that just brought Matthew 14 alive in terms of, when Jesus showed up literally after being on the mountain in prayer, he comes down and he sends the disciples off to go across the water, and he says he'll meet them on the other side. For what purpose, we don't know, but he was just going, as you recall from the story, they're in the middle of a massive storm. It was blinding storm, and it was a horrific storm, and it went till the 4th hour of the night. In the Roman terms, that would be between the 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Right before light shines. And Jesus walking on the water, just standing there. And all it took was Peter to just say, Lord, if it is you, bid me to come. And there's something about this attitude right now that we are, I believe, biologically, sociologically, spiritually, all of the illies, is that we're at that fourth watch. This fourth watch is where we're going to start seeing the massive change happening. And here's our moment, I believe, as the body of Christ, our moment, our hour, to be demonstrating our faith and bringing the gospel confidently, just like we're doing, recognizing that this phase of the light shining is going to be a continuum that's going to bring back many who have lost their faith and have walked away, and that are coming back, and those that don't know him as well. Because here is such a picture of what science is learning how to do, is to work within this complete black box without any idea of how to approach it. Most scientific experiments that I've seen to this point, all the different proposals that we've been reading, are scientists that are just, I hate to say guessing, but they're just trying something that they would just, they just like a toy idea, right? And it's this phase right now where science is going to have to start walking on the water. So is all of the economy. So is all of those unemployed. I mean, as these numbers are all increasing, there's no way out. And I believe Jesus is going to show up in ways in people's lives individually that's going to blow our minds in the coming weeks. And we just need to be ready for that.
Wow, man. That's a great word.
Amen.
Well, good. It's great to see you.
Yeah. All right, you guys. God bless you.
All right. We look forward to hanging out when the lockdown's over.
Either that or we have a Zoom meeting where we all drink coffee and just watch each other.
All right. Thanks, Lou.
All right, guys.
We did that here at the station because we were
a
few of us were getting together like once a month just to hang out with coffee, and the date came, and it's like, well, we're not going to get to hang out this month, and let's do it on Google Hangouts. And there we were with our coffee, about 10 of us. It was kind of fun.
Yeah,
okay,
that's good.
I've got to share what happened. On the way here, Brian and I saw a man dressed up like Superman selling face masks. Yeah. And I'm like, because I only saw
were you guys in Hollywood, or this was here in Orange County?
We were on Adams and Harbor Boulevard. And we were on our way here, and I look over, and there's this, I said, Brian goes, look at that guy. He's selling face masks. He has a huge sign that says face mask, homemade sign. And I said, he's wearing orange galoshes. It's like I was so focused on his orange galoshes, his knee-high orange galoshes. Brian said, that's nothing. He's dressed like Superman. And sure enough, I look up. He's got a cape on. He's got everything on and a face mask, of course, but it's Superman with a face mask.
Yeah, I did read that Superman had been reassigned to selling face masks on
Harbor and
major streets in the cities of Orange County. Yeah.
I think this guy's trying to take back superhero status because lately we've been talking about the doctors and the nurses. They're the real superheroes. So here comes Superman saying, no, I'm back.
Yeah.
It's like, no.
There you go. Yeah. Well, one of the things is right now in Costa Mesa, you're not allowed in a store without a face mask, and they won't let you in. So a lot of people aren't prepared, especially a lot of people who aren't informed. And most people aren't informed about these things. They're quarantining. They're watching Netflix, and they don't know these things. So they go to make a little foray over to Trader Joe's or to, a market, and they're not allowed in.
Yeah.
So he's really a convenience, Superman convenience.
Yeah.
But his cape looked pretty small considering his size.
Yeah. I think it was a child's Halloween costume, actually.
No, the rest fit him pretty well. It was just that cape. It was almost like around his neck like a scarf. It was a really interesting look. It wasn't down his back. It was kind of pulled over to the side.
Maybe he puts it over his face when he walks into the
That
store.
could be.
Yeah.
That could be.
So, we're going to answer some questions here in just a second. But, I just wanted to say to our listeners, and specifically to our listeners who are also members of our congregation, we just wanted to say we miss you.
So bad.
Desperately.
Yes.
We love you. We're praying for you. We're trying to do, what we can do to continue to minister. I was telling somebody today, it's hard because, I know that Cheryl and I both, as we teach and we're on camera and we're going into various homes, and I know that our congregants are seeing us, but we're not seeing them. We're just seeing the lens of a camera, So it gets to the point where you're like, I've seen a couple of churches where they took and they put the faces of people where they would normally sit. And put their names, just to have like a congregation out there. I'm half tempted to say that, okay, the next phase, we're going to do that.
I think what's hard too is our church is more like a family. And there's this family feeling like I feel like I'm missing my family. And just, getting coffee after church and talking and catching up on people and seeing them face to face and talking to them. And just even wondering, what is the new norm? Like when we do get to go back to church, what will it be like? Like how far do we have to sit? Do we not embrace anymore? I mean, I'm praying for the eradication of COVID and that these pestilence don't come back till the tribulation.
Yeah, and we need to keep praying regardless of what Governor Cuomo says. He says that they brought the death toll down. God had nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
that's a pretty bold statement, but we beg to differ.
Especially when you consider Samaritan's Purse is right there in the center of New York, praying and treating people more successfully.
But
for the most part,
we will keep trusting God and believing Him. And like you said, Cheryl, praying that this is eradicated. And, all throughout history, the discovery of different things has often happened through people who were asking God to show them things and trusting Him. And He did show them things. So we're going to just pray that happens too. One quick thing, and then we'll go. Jimmy and Liz Schwarte in Queens, New York. I just spoke with Jimmy today, and he is doing really, really well. He's doing much, much better. So thankful for the prayers. Liz now is getting the brunt of it. Jimmy had it first. Liz was, when Jimmy was in the real, hard part of it, Liz was just sort of, felt like she was coming down with it. Now Liz is, and she's the wife and the mother of two small children. So she's kind of in the thick of it right now. So if you would just keep praying for the Schwartes in New York City, I know they would really, really appreciate that. So.
Absolutely. All right, 888-564-6173. Brian Perez here with Brian and Cheryl Brodersen from Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. Let's go to the phones. Here is Alma listening in Texas. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Alma.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, well, great. I've been learning a lot in these weeks, and everybody's, I'm not saying like in fear, but everybody's hesitating, and my marriage is is having their own questions, and it's been 3 weeks since everything started in Texas. I don't know in California. The only question I have is, the person I most love. Obviously I made a commitment and everything. I married, and we're gonna be 8 years on Tuesday, But our marriage is in fear because this is our second marriage for both of us, and the Word of God says that we shouldn't have gotten a divorce, but we did, and then we were truly in love and everything, which the obstacles are still there. My question is for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
How much could I tend to this marriage? I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. I'm giving everything that I should. I'm a female, and I'm sacrificing. I'm going by the Bible. I'm going by Jesus Christ. Everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are you having problems in this new marriage? Is that the problem?
It's not a new marriage. It's going to be 8 years.
Okay, but it's your second marriage. So you're having problems in this second marriage? Is there
Just
violence?
now.
Okay.
No, there's no violence. No.
There's violence. So then what you're saying is the problems are really that you're just maybe arguing because you're quarantined and you're stuck together all the time?
No, it's not. I guess my real question for you guys is, what is a marriage in the biblical?
Mm-hmm. Are you worried about the fact that you were married before and now you're wondering if this marriage is legitimate or recognized by God, or can you expect God to bless this marriage, or is it maybe a mistake?
Both of us were.
Okay, is that what you're wondering? Is that the thing that's on your mind?
Oh, yes, both of us were married before.
Okay, so now you're wondering, 8 years later, you're wondering, did we make a mistake?
No, I was divorced previously.
Yeah.
I didn't want to get married to nobody until 11 years later.
Okay. Well, let's just answer the question that I think you're asking. I think you're asking, is this marriage legitimate? Does God recognize it? Did we make a mistake? It seems like that's what you're getting at. So the answer I would give you is, based on what you just said, you've been married coming up on 8 years. You're seeking the Lord. You love Jesus. You're a Christian. I'm assuming that's the case with your husband as well. Then I would say that you're in this marriage, and this is the marriage that God's given you, and you just you make it be all that He wants it to be. The Bible gives the husband instruction that the husband is to love the wife as Christ loved the church. He gives the wife instruction in Ephesians 5. And if you just continue to seek the Lord as a married couple and ask Him to guide you and to bless you, don't worry about the past. The past is way behind you. It's 8 years behind you. You can't reverse that or change that. I'm guessing, but I think that maybe you were even not a Christian before when you were married. And so you have a new opportunity in this marriage, and you want to just take it as God's gift and love each other and just keep moving forward. And don't second guess or doubt or wonder, oh, did we make a mistake? Like I said, you're too far down the road to even worry about that. You're well into this marriage, and just receive it as this is what God has for us, and we're going to live according to His will.
I would also add, too, that there's no cookie cutter marriage. Like when you're asking what a marriage looks like, I think it looks really different depending on who those two individuals are. In some marriages, I know Christian marriages, the woman is in charge of all the finances, and other marriages, the husband's in charge of all the finances. Some marriages, the husband is the better cook, so he does all the meals, and the wife has other things that she does. So I don't think that you can even assign roles, so to speak, or personalities, or because our communication skills are all different. And, the things that I really treasure about Brian are not necessarily things that another woman would treasure in her marriage. Like, one of the things that gets me really excited is if Brian makes the bed and he started making the bed, I get so excited when I see the bed made. I'm like, Brian, you love me. You made the bed.
Except for yesterday when I made the bed.
Yes, yesterday. I did everything I could to possibly show Brian, like, do not make this bed because I'm going to wash the sheets. So I stripped my whole side of the bed. He was sleeping in. And he gets up and he goes, wow, what did you do to the bed? That was so weird. It was so hard to remake it. I'm like, no. I'm washing the sheets. Don't do that. And sure enough, I had to pull everything off, all the pillows off, everything. So
I go, man, you must have had a really restless night.
Right. Did you have a nightmare? What's going on?
So anyway, but those are things where when I talk to other women, we all have different things that speak to us, or maybe we all have different things that we want out of the marriage. And sometimes the things that we want out of marriage are unrealistic. And we have to pray and say, Lord, what is the purpose of our marriage? So, Alma, what I would do is I think you need to sit down with your husband, and I think you need to pray together. And I think you need to say, Lord, what do you want our marriage to look like? How can we serve you with our marriage? How can our marriage be a gift to you that you can use for your glory? And I know that my marriage to Brian has been a blessing to a lot of people. I mean, we've had people say, how do you get along? We've even had people blessed that we fight, which I think is crazy, but gives them a lot of grace. Actually, we've been quarantined together and we're not fighting. We're just, we do have things where he doesn't get my hints about, I'm going to wash the sheets, but that just is something to laugh about. I think when you get to our age, you laugh mainly. You just kind of like, wah, that's so us. So, or, we know each other after 40 years. I'll say, did you really think I would do that? We've been married. You've known me 40 years. Or he'll say, you need to stop doing this. I said, it's not going to work. You've been trying to rework me for 40 years. It's time to give up. It's just time to give up. Just throw in the towel, Brian. It hasn't worked yet. It's not going to work. I am who I am. But we've really gotten used to each other. And so, Alma, I would say, give your marriage to Jesus. Give it to Jesus with your husband together. And just say, Lord, we give this to you to use in any way you want to use. And you make it what you want it to be.
Does that help, Alma?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for calling us today on Pastor's Perspective. Next, we're going to go to Everett in Virginia. Welcome to the program, Everett.
Man, thanks for having me.
Great to have you.
I was running.
It sounded like it, yeah.
I know, it's crazy. First off, I just want to say thank you, man, Cheryl and Brian. Man, you guys are just such a great couple. It's so refreshing to hear something like that. Like, you see so many messed up relationships in the world, and so many people striving to be, godly, but everybody falls short when they do. And you guys are just awesome. I just got to say that. But
thank you. We appreciate that.
My question.
It's not true, but we appreciate it.
If I can catch my breath.
Well, we do have the question up here on the screen. You must have asked it before you started running, but it says, how do you know when you're praying for signs that whether or not those signs are from God or not, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. What would you guys say?
Give me a quick example, Everett. Like what kind of a sign?
Okay, so quick example. I used to always pray to God for, what I need to do, where I need to be going, everything. I mean, my job, my work, girlfriend, everything. One time, I don't know, I've had so many messed up relationships. I had a ring on my finger. It was a Lord's Prayer ring. And I said, Lord, if there's another girl out there, I don't know how to pick a girl. There's so many. So if there's another girl out here with a ring like this, I'll know she's from you. Girl came up to me that weekend at church. She goes, hey, Everett. I said, what's up? She said, that ring on your finger? She goes, I got the same one. I said, oh, really? And, long story short, I didn't really like this girl, and I always felt like I always felt this bad spirit off of her. And but every time I prayed, man, it was like I was being led to her. So we actually ended up getting engaged.
Really?
Just, the problem was it wasn't good and it wasn't right. And I know I felt the temptation of my flesh, and we always repented, but like it was never right. And one night I just got so angry, and I was like, I can never feel this way towards a person, especially if I'm not even married her yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like I broke up with her, and a couple days later, it's like, man, the birds are chirping, like the sun came out. It's like, oh my goodness, like thank you, Jesus. But how did I get to that point where I got so confused?
Yeah.
And how did I get manipulated like that?
I'll tell you this.
Trusted
prayer. Yeah, you can't ask for a sign or, put faith in a sign. We're going to put faith in the Word of God. And what's going to happen with signs is they're only going to confirm and affirm what God says and what you're feeling God is leading. So if you were already dating someone and you're saying, Lord, if this is your will, if this is really what you have for me, you make it clear to me. That's when God brings, and I don't like the word signs as much as I like the word affirmations, confirmations. And, just a little bit about Brian and I. When 40 years ago, actually almost 41 years ago, when we were dating, because I really liked Brian, I was worried that, am I just doing this for myself? And I want something that can last. I don't want something that, what if I get married and he's not the right person and we don't get along and it doesn't last? And I started having all these fears. And I began to really pray. So one of the affirmations is this one night, I broke up with him. I said, I can't do this. I don't feel good about this. I really need to hear from the Lord. So Brian left, and I didn't know where he went. And all night, I woke up I think it was around 1 o'clock. I woke up, and I just thought, I've got to just pray. And I just went to my Bible, and I just started praying and just searching the scriptures and praying. And I don't know how to say this, but when I was in Hebrews, the scripture, marriage is honorable, it jumped out at me. Only I was reading what's called the Amplified Version. So it said so much about marriage being honorable. And my fear was if I get married, am I cutting myself off from ministry to the Lord? Does he want to be my first? Am I letting Brian come in between my relationship to God and myself? And when I read that, this peace just flooded me. And by that time, I think it was about 5:30, 5:45, this peace flooded me. Right then, Brian called me. Right after the peace came, maybe 5-10 minutes later, he called me. And I said, where are you at? And he said, I'm at my mom's house. And he said, this is crazy. I was praying for you from 1 o'clock till this morning. And he said, about 15 minutes ago, this peace overwhelmed me. And I knew that we were going to get married. I just knew it was the Lord. And I think we both needed that affirmation and confirmation. A little later, I went to the church and I saw a woman who had spoken a word to me the year before about being married. And there she was at church, and I hadn't seen her in a year. And she reaffirmed all those things, and because it was such a big decision. But you see, I had the word first, and then God began to affirm the word. Brian and I had the same situation when we were praying about going to England. We were looking for, first of all, we were praying for the Lord's will, and then we were looking for open doors. But then every time the door opened, we were asking the Lord for confirmation, either from someone godly that we knew, just different confirmations. So I like to use the word confirmation or affirmation rather than signs. And I think that's the problem. You ask for a sign rather than, there's this girl, I think she's really neat. I feel attracted to her. Lord, if this is your will, you confirm it, you affirm it, and I also think when you're talking relationships, you've got to analyze, why do I want this relationship? Am I doing it so I can serve the Lord better? Or am I doing it because I've got these needs that I want met? And so, there's a lot of dynamics there. Brian, I feel like you have something to say.
No, we're running out of time.
Oh.
That's all I was thinking. But Everett, I think that word from Cheryl is great for your future. I don't think we need to tell you anything about the past. I think you figured that out yourself. You made a mistake. So, yeah, don't go with a sign like that. And, the sign you should have gone with is, I don't even like this girl, and she's not really that godly. You should have gone with that and said, okay, forget the ring thing, because that's because that's almost superstition versus just the reality of her relationship.
Yeah,
with the
and
Lord.
watch out for superstition.
Yeah, but it's great. It's always good to talk to Everett, and we're glad you're getting encouraged. And we're done.
Yes, that is all the time we have. Unfortunately, I was going to go back to Everett and ask him if he was running from that girl. If that's if that's why he was running, I don't know. But that is all the time we have on today's program. Sorry that we couldn't get to your call. Guess what, though? We will be back next week on Monday between 3 and 4 p.m. Pacific time. We pray that today's show has blessed you. And call us on Monday. We'd love to hear from you. And find a church to go to. Well, not a church to go to, but log in. You can try our church, live.cccm.com. Check it out. Services at 8:30 and 11 in the morning Pacific time on Sunday. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Pastor's Perspective. We trust you've been blessed and had your question answered. Join us Monday through Friday and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/pastorsperspective. The preceding was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, California.